Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson and welcome back to the Spider-Verse Retrospectives. I apologize in advance if it feels like I'm rushing through this video at all, but I just did a whole 13-minute run that I think I actually did a pretty well job on, but for whatever reason I had technical difficulties and I had to kind of scrap the whole thing, so I'm starting over from scratch, so again, apologies if that affects the quality of the video in any way. But anyway, so in terms of tie-ins to Spider-Geddon, we have made it through the Vault of Spiders tie-ins, the Spider-Force tie-ins, the Spider-Girls tie-ins, and the Spectacular Spider-Man tie-ins, complete with 2 video comics. I think it's time we move on to the final series of tie-ins, as we take a look at what Gwen Stacy was doing during Spider-Geddon with Spider-Gwen, Ghost Spider, Spider-Geddon. Quick disclaimer, I have a rant stored up that I've been kind of keeping safe for a little while now, but it's one I want to finally get out here. Why the hell is her name Ghost Spider now? I mean, really, why is Ghost Spider her new superhero alias? Because, quite frankly, it's stupid. I'm not saying the name Ghost Spider is not a bad superhero name, it's just that it does not really work well when applied to Gwen Stacy as Spider-Woman, because it really does not make sense in or out of universe. In universe, the reason why she adopts the name Ghost Spider is because at the end of her last solo series, her identity as Spider-Woman was outed in her universe, and now people know that Gwen Stacy and Spider-Woman are one and the same. So they start calling her Spider-Gwen, and she hates the nickname. So she wants to change it up. But the thing is, her superhero alias has still never changed. She still goes around calling herself Spider-Woman. It's just that nobody else calls her Spider-Woman. So I still find that kind of dumb that she still changed her name to Ghost Spider. And even in universe, it really doesn't make sense to change it to Ghost Spider, because really, what about her makes her ghostly? Is it because she's Gwen Stacy and Gwen Stacy is supposed to be dead? Well, that doesn't really make sense in the context of her universe. And if we're going along the lines of, oh, well, they want her to be more active force in the main Marvel universe, it still doesn't make sense there, because, well, then if she had to explain the name Ghost Spider, then people would still ask, so you're Gwen Stacy then? And she's not going to reveal her identity like that. Why would she? Why would she just go around saying that? Hell, that'd be putting a big target on Peter's back, because if they can figure out that Gwen Stacy was this person who died, then they might be able to figure out that Spider-Man is Peter Parker. What I'm saying is that it doesn't really work in the context of the book, and it really does not work when applied to Gwen Stacy, because really, the only ghostly thing about her design is that her outfit's white. That's really it. And even then, I thought that was just more of an aesthetic choice than anything. And even from a meta point of view, it really does not work. Why do they want to change her name to Ghost Spider in a context? I guess the main meta reason is because, well, they don't want her being confused with other Spider characters, or they don't want anyone to think that this is just Gwen Stacy brought back to life. Well, to that I say, that's stupid. That's just all around stupid. Why can't you just tell everyone this is the Gwen Stacy of another world where she became a spider person? That I think is easy enough to grasp. So I think it can easily work in that regard. So I think I think it can work in that regard, but even in the context of the book, why can't she just go around calling herself Spider-Woman? Is it because you don't want her getting confused with the main universe Spider-Woman? Well, to that I say, that's still dumb, because there have been instances, even in modern comics, where superheroes share a name. And if you want one good example from the Spider-Verse, Peter Parker and Miles Morales. They both live on Earth 616, and they both still use the name Spider-Man. It can be confusing in universe, but you can easily distinguish them. Hell, even out of universe, you can tell which one is which, because Peter's books tend to only use the name Spider-Man, whereas Miles's books put his name in the forefront, letting you know this guy isn't the original Spider-Man. It's Miles Morales, the other guy. So even if you wanted to use the excuse of you don't want people to confuse Gwen's Spider-Woman with Jessica Drew's Spider-Woman, well, you can still go around calling her Spider-Gwen. It's a good nickname. And in universe, they can still keep calling her Spider-Woman. It just doesn't make sense, in my opinion, and it really doesn't, and I don't think it really works. And before anyone brings up the argument of, well, she's kind of a ghost because she's jumping between multiple universes, being a phantom like Spider Spider. No, she isn't. The only other universe she jumps to in the majority of her books is between her world of Earth 65 and the main Marvel universe of Earth 616. It doesn't make sense in that regard, and so I still find it dumb. And you want to know what makes the name Ghost Spider even dumber in my opinion? That is that there already is another Spider person in the multiverse who uses that name, and it applies so much better to him. There's a version of there's a version of Peter Parker who in his universe had gotten his soul sent to purgatory, and when he was released from purgatory, he was bound with his soul was bound with all this with the souls of various other people who sought redemption, and thus their supernatural elements transformed him into the Ghost Spider, not only being that world's version of Spider-Man, but also that world's version of the Ghost Rider, because in his superhero form, he had a full white body, a spider on his chest, and a flaming skull. As such, the name Ghost Spider works so much better in context to him than in context to Spider-Gwen, and just it doesn't make sense in my opinion. And as a whole, it feels stupid. It just feels really very stupid, and really does, and just kind of annoys me. As such, I'm just gonna keep calling her Spider-Gwen because I think Ghost Spider is dumb. So there you go. But rant over. Let's actually talk about the context of this book. So, like I said, these tie-ins finally give us the answers as to what the heck Gwen Stacy was doing during the events of Spider-Geddon. Because after all, if you remember what happened in the main miniseries, Gwen kind of got taken out of the action, as she was at Ground Zero when Otto's lab got blown up, and before she could make an escape, Verna of the Inheritors managed to steal her web watch, and while the rest of the web warriors thought that she was dead as a result, in reality, she actually made it out okay, except now she was trapped in some random reality in the multiverse. As such, this book finally gives us some context as to what happened to her and how she survived and how she got back into the main actions. Is the story itself any good, or was this one that we could have just ignored? Well, it's time we take a look at it and find out. As we take a look at the Spider-Gwen tie-ins, starting things off with Spider-Gwen Ghost Spider #1. And the comic actually begins on Earth 65 as Gwen's just swinging around New York, doing her thing, celebrating the freedom, so to speak. And that's kind of partially in the context, that's kind of a double standard, or kind of a dual meaning in this case, as not only does she enjoy swinging around her world as a resident spider person, but also because she's newly released from prison. Apparently at the end of her last book, she wound up getting arrested, she wound up turning herself in for all of her various crimes, and she did go on trial and did face prison time. As such, this book essentially picks up after that, as she's done her time and is now released and just, going back to being a superhero. And the first thing she does as a superhero is, while she's swinging around the city, she ends up finding 3 muggers trying to rob a woman, and she comes in and just kicks their asses, webbing 2 muggers to the side of a building, while the other one just runs away scared. So, all in a day's work. Although what weirds Gwen out is that after she saves the woman, the woman ends up hugging her, thanking her, which is a little strange for Gwen, considering that she's used to people hating her and calling her a menace, since they all thought that she killed Peter Parker. But the thing is, part of the reason why they're doing this is because at the end of her last solo book, apparently she did wind up saving her version of New York from the ninja group known as the Hand, and a lot of people are actually grateful for that. So now her reputation is mostly positive. So again, she does kind of appreciate that, though it's still weird to her out. But either way, once it's all done, she does ask the woman to call the cops and let them know about the 2 muggers that are webbed to the wall, and so Gwen just decides to swing away because she needs to get a bite to eat, though even she thinks the whole encounter was a little awkward. However, either way, as Gwen swings away and gets close to a diner, she quickly realizes something. She got no money. Basically, she has nothing in her bank account, so even if she wanted to get food, she'd have nothing to pay for it. However, she quickly sees a meal ticket as she looks to the street below. She sees her friend Harry Osborn, and so after quickly ducking to an alley and shifting her costume back into her civilian garb, because you have to remember she's still bonded with a symbiote, she ends up meeting up with Harry. They exchange hellos. She asks if they can have dinner, and so he goes to the diner to help her pay for. And so they go to a diner and just kind of talk things out while they eat. And essentially, Harry just wants to ask Gwen how she's doing and, well, how long she's been out of prison. And apparently she's been out of prison for at least 52 days, and this is not the first time that she's talked to someone about her experiences with it, as apparently the Mary Janes wanted to sit down with Gwen and ask her what had happened. And basically, Gwen states that while she regrets the necessity to go to prison, she doesn't regret actually going there, because after all, part of the reason why she still does this whole Spider-Woman thing is because she's trying to set a good example for people like her with special abilities and so forth, and let them know that they can't just use them willy-nilly. They need to face the consequence of their actions, and they need to do better by their and they have to do better by their powers. And so likewise, Gwen pretty much facing up for her crimes and actually facing jail time. Those were the consequences, and she had to accept them whether she liked them or not. Again, I dig that. It's nice. I like that. It's nice. But on top of that, that's also part of why she still wants to go back to being Spider-Woman upon being released, because, well, she still wants to continue setting that example. She still wants to do good in the world. After all, she has great power, and they still contain a great responsibility, so she's still willing to go and do this whole thing despite the risks associated with it. However, as this conversation continues on, she happens to glance outside the diner, and she sees a strange figure on the opposite building. Specifically, Spider-Ham, who upon Gwen immediately seeing him, she just tells Harry she has to go, and so she runs out of the diner grabbing her burger on the way out. As such, she quickly shifts back into her Spidey jammies and goes to meet Spider-Ham on the roof of the building across the street, and Spider-Ham lets her know that they have an emergency, specifically the emergency with the Inheritors. And Gwen, already knowing how dangerous the Inheritors are, immediately decides she has to immediately recognize the danger and just goes with Spider-Ham through the portal. Though Spider-Ham just tells Gwen that it's probably fine. It's probably just a false alarm. They'll get Gwen back home before she knows it. So the comic cuts ahead to when Gwen is flying through the multiverse. Yeah, if you remember well, like I said, pretty much from between that moment and this moment, Gwen and the Web Warriors went up against the Inheritors, and they got their asses handed to them, and so now these are the resulting consequences as we see Gwen just kind of floating throughout the multiverse, most likely having activated her Web Watch before Verna was able to take it from her. So now she's just kind of floating lazily between realities, as little by little everything comes back to her, and she quickly realizes, oh shit, the Inheritors are out, I gotta get back there, people are losing, 2 of my friends are dead, I have to go help them. Though she also quickly realizes her watch is gone, and she's kind of stuck. Though thankfully she does have at least one less problem of floating aimlessly through realities, as she ends up coming to a portal and flying into a random universe. Although upon arriving, the laws of physics are immediately applied, and she starts falling straight to the ground below. Thankfully, she's able to slow her ascent with a few well-placed web shots, which does end up saving her life, but it does end up getting her banged up a bit upon hitting the ground. As such, Gwen immediately starts trying to reorient herself and decides to see if she can, and decides to look around to see if this is a universe she's familiar with. And apparently, one easy way to tell if the world you're visiting is one that you're familiar with is to check the brands of check the names of certain brands, because after all, when you have parallel universes, while some things will be similar, there are going to be some little minor differences here and there. Like, for example, apparently an easy way to tell which universe you're in is to see if Dr. Pepper is called Dr. Pepper or Professor Pop. And when Gwen picks up a bottle of the titular brand, it's called Professor Pow. So clearly, this is not a universe that she is familiar with. As such, Gwen immediately just gets up and shifts back into her civilian clothes because she realizes she needs to get out of this universe ASAP, as there's still a battle going on Earth 616, and she has to be there on the front lines. Her friends are in danger, she has to help them. The only problem is she has no idea how to get back. Her web watch is gone, her web watch is stolen, and she has no idea if this reality has a Reed Richards or a Tony Stark or anyone capable of opening portals to other dimensions. So she feels like she's kind of stuck in the dark. But inspiration does hit her as she wanders the streets of this New York. She ends up seeing a ripped poster for Oscorp, and she figures, hey, Oscorp's full of technological advancements. I'll just go there and hope that the Osborns in this universe aren't supervillains. As such, after getting some privacy, she shifts back into her Spider-Woman attire and swings all the way over to Oscorp, only to find the building to be abandoned, and apparently having been abandoned for years, as the windows are broken, there are cobwebs all over the interior and over all the furniture. Basically, it looks like nobody's been here for a while. And while this initially does discourage Gwen, she at least thinks that maybe this could be like a blessing in disguise. Maybe she could just, go in, investigate the labs, and see what she can find. However, before she gets too far in, she hears a familiar veering, the sound of flight engines. And Gwen quickly realizes she's about to have a visitor. And that visitor quickly bursts right through the wall as we see this world's version of the Green Goblin, who is a girl who is very much crazy and intent on attacking Gwen for trespassing. As such, Gwen and the Goblin end up duking it out with one another, and basically it's clear that while this Goblin may have a vast array of tools and utilities at her disposal, she clearly has no experience fighting a spider person because she doesn't know how to adapt to a lot of Gwen's abilities. So it does at least tell Gwen that this world at least doesn't have a spider on standby. As such, Gwen is able to evade most of her attacks, although she still gets hit by others, and even gets so angry at the Goblin attacking her that it briefly causes her symbiote to flare up and kind of go almost a little more venomous than she would like. But eventually she does manage to get onto the Goblin's glider, and while the Goblin tries throwing her off by causing it to spin, Gwen's natural stickiness allows her to stay on the glider, and thus when the Goblin jumps back on it, Gwen just webs her to the thing and intends to grab her and deliver a fist to her face. However, before she can do so, someone nearby tells Gwen to stop, and that briefly distracts Gwen enough for the Goblin to punch her off and then make a run for it. As such, as Gwen gets her composure, Gwen pretty much starts getting her composure, intent on following the Goblin, but that's when the person in the shadows comes out and wants to know what the hell Gwen was doing. And when Gwen looks to see who it was, she sees this world's version of Peter Parker, which Gwen is not exactly happy to see him, but she finally decides this is kind of the best lead she's had so far. This is a Peter Parker, and he's here at what's left of Oscorp. He might be able to help her. As such, Gwen decides to take a gamble, as after all, if there's a Peter Parker in this world, then odds are there's a Gwen Stacy, and law of averages might mean that she is dead in this world too. And so the comic ends as Gwen unmasks herself and reveals herself to Peter, much to his horror when he sees her, which is where the comic ends. So, yeah. What are my thoughts on Spider-Gwen Ghost Spider #1? Well, I think it's actually, despite my 5-minute rant about how I despise the name Ghost Spider when applied to Gwen Stacy, this is actually a pretty good start to the story. This is actually a pretty good start to the series. Well, more specifically, it's a good start to this storyline. I will say this, Spider-Gwen Ghost Spider does at least bank on the fact that you know who Gwen Stacy is. And while it does kind of give you a drive-by of what happened in her previous series, if you didn't read that far, it doesn't really give you too much of an introduction as to who Gwen Stacy is in the context of this universe. It very much goes in with the knowledge that you know who she is, you're aware of her situation, and so it doesn't really do a lot to get you up to speed on how this world operates. The most they talk about is how she's faced prison time, how the situation has currently changed in her world. She's still friends with Harry Osborn, and how she kind of wants to change her nickname. That's really the biggest extent. Otherwise, you're kind of left to fill in the rest of the holes in the story yourself, which isn't a bad thing. After all, this entire storyline is meant to be a tie-in to Spider-Geddon. So they obviously expect that if you're reading this, you're probably at least reading Spider-Geddon. So odds are if you're reading that, you probably read Spider-Verse where Spider-Gwen debuted. So again, they do at the very least, they do expect you to be coming into this with the idea of who Spider-Gwen is in advance, and that's not really a bad thing given the context. So it's kind of maybe a flaw, but I'm gonna give it the benefit of the doubt and assume that if you're reading this book, you at least know who the character is. So there you go. But even then, the drive-by is a good way of essentially catching up any readers who are familiar with the Spider-Gwen concept, but haven't really been caught up with her story. So I dig that. It's at least nice. And in the context of having this be a tie-in to Spider-Geddon, it very much establishes the limitations and stakes rather early on. Excuse me 1 second. Sorry about that, Chinny wanted to be let out of the room. But yeah, like I said, it very much establishes the stakes that Gwen will be facing in the story rather well. As it gives you the It gives you the Clip Notes version of what happened in Spider-Geddon, with the Inheritors being free and Gwen having lost her watch and now being stranded on a parallel world. And and honestly, I think it works well. But what makes it interesting, in my opinion, is that, like with the Spectacular Spider-Man tie-ins, the events of this book are disconnected enough from the events of Spider-Geddon, but also are still tied to them because well, the whole reason why Gwen is here is because the Inheritors took her watch and then essentially just left her for dead in a random universe. And as a result, there's a sense of urgency in the story, as well, Gwen is now stranded in this random version of New York without any idea of how she's going to escape, as she's unfamiliar, as she has no idea if this world has counterparts to any of the geniuses in her world, or even in the main Marvel universe. She's essentially going in totally blind, and she can't just go around saying, "Hey, look at me, I'm a superhero from random universe," because she still doesn't know the lay of the land. She won't know if that'll get her shot at, or if people will want to help her as a result of that. So it definitely still creates a sense of unease, as she is very much in unfamiliar territory without really any means of getting out of it. So I like that. So it does actually work well. And on top of that, I like that we see that she's still trying to utilize any connections that she at least had in the other universes to try and help her out in this one. Because after all, some things that are consistent between universes is that Oscorp is a mega corporation that has made advancements in technology, and odds are if you go there might be something that could help you in some regard. Though again, considering Gwen's history with versions of Norman Osborn, I can understand why she would feel like this is a crapshoot. So again, I do like that. But what I also do enjoy is, well, being able to explore this other universe, because, well, as I've stated, as a fan of multiverse stories and parallel universes, one of the greatest thrills when it comes to exploring parallel realities is seeing the lay of the land, seeing how this world operates, what makes it similar enough to the worlds that we know, but in what ways it's different. And I like seeing that in this, and the way they showcase that in this story, I think is interesting. I like seeing that. As like with Gwen, we're in unfamiliar territory, and for the most part, while things look similar enough to the world we know, we're only really seeing things on the surface level. We're not really getting more into this world's history or what it experienced in comparison to any of the other realities we've seen so far. So we're just as cautious as Gwen is upon going in. And then when she finally does arrive, we do get to see more about what's going on in this world when she arrives at the Oscorp building and finds it abandoned, only to be met with two new individuals. This world's version of the Green Goblin, who's a girl, and this world's version of Peter Parker. And we can at least establish that this world does not have a Spider-Person, as the Goblin didn't seem to have experience fighting one with her when she went out and duked it out with Gwen. But then likewise, in the case of Peter Parker, it makes you wonder what his story is, because we can get a general idea of who Peter is based on experiences with alternate versions of him, including the one from Gwen Stacy's universe and the main Marvel universe. But that doesn't mean that things are guaranteed to be true. Like Gwen said at the end of the comic, her revealing her identity to Peter was a gamble. She was banking on the fact that she and Peter probably had some kind of close relationship in this world, like they did in her world or the main Marvel universe. So her unmasking herself and saying, "I need your help, Peter," she had no idea if that would work. Though clearly there is something there, as when Peter saw Gwen, he was horrified. So it's a good way of drawing you in and giving you an idea of what this world is like, what Gwen is going to have, what trials Gwen has to face, and in the case of the Goblin, what obstacles she's going to have to work through in order to finally escape this world. I dig that. It's nice, and it's a good way of setting up not only the story, but also showcasing what Gwen's going to be dealing with in this tie-in to Spider-Geddon. So on the whole, I do think issue 1 is a good start to the story. Sets up the stakes rather well, establishes Gwen's situation rather quickly, immediately sets the stakes, immediately creates a sense of unease, and leaves you asking more and more questions as she continues exploring this strange new universe. So on the whole, definitely a good start. So yeah, that's really all I have to say. I thank you for watching the video. I'm Samuel Johnson, and I hope to see you on Tuesday as we see Gwen learn a bit more about this universe and just who this version of the Green Goblin truly is. So to them, I hope you have a good night and take care. Good day, actually, but whatever.